Okay, I think we're live.
Yep.
Hi, everyone. We have a slightly slimmed down panel at the moment, but Helen Smith is just going through some technical difficulties. Will be joining us very shortly. I am Ryan McWhinney. I'm the Senior Director of Business and Legal Affairs at Merlin. And today we're going to be talking about live streaming. So live streaming, it's not a new area by any stretch of the imagination. It's been around for many years, particularly sort of in a festival webcast scene. But at least in the licensing world, and Sophie, you can probably speak to this later, I think it's definitely feels like the neglected middle child. But no more. Since COVID has hit, it's getting all sorts of attention, particularly as physical gigs, which have obviously been a really important source of revenue for a lot of artists and labels, have obviously become impossible to hold. So, I'm based in London. As we're approaching sort of another lockdown, and I know Europe and the rest of the world is doing something similar. Obviously, live streaming looks to be more important than ever. So today we're going to look at what opportunities, what issues live streaming currently face, and we'll look at what the future holds for live streaming and what some of the potential long-term impacts live streaming could have on the music sort of sector generally. And to help us do that, we've got our panelists here who are all highly experienced and seasoned, and none of which so Helen, can you hear us yet?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh,
we can hear you. Welcome.
Can you see me?
We can't see you yet.
Okay.
But so Helen Smith is the executive chair at Impala.
Hi.
Who is not using Chrome, but is the Impala, of course, being the European Trade Association for independent labels. We've got Sophie Goossens, who heads up Reed Smith's entertainment and media industry practice in Paris. And we have Nico Perez, who is the co-founder and CEO of Mixcloud, which of course is the audio sharing platform that focuses on mixes, DJ radio programs, and was one of the first established streaming platforms to move into live streaming, which we'll talk about later. Now, just before we sort of kick off, I think there should be a chat function over to the right-hand side. So if anyone has any questions that they want to sort of lob to our panelists during this next hour, please do so. We'll do our best to run through those questions both during and if we've got some time at the end. So to kick off, now I expect that not everyone out there may have had the unmitigated pleasure of getting involved in the licensing side. So Sophie, I was wondering whether you could just give us a brief overview of the legal landscape and how would one go about sort of licensing possibly a streaming service?
Tiny little question just to get started. I think we could probably write a book, if not 2 or 3, on the topic. So we'll do my best to try and give you a flavor of what one needs to look at in maybe 5 minutes. I mean, of course, there's a ton of legal issues to consider when you are going to start a live streaming business. The most complicated one is by far looking at music rights. So I think that already says it all, and I can see Nico nodding. I mean, but understanding how it works is nonetheless essential, and I think that's why we're having the panel today. It's essential because, of course, no one wants to be on the wrong side of the law or music law. No one wants to be infringing, and also we see every day at Reed Smith how understanding really how the money flows will make the difference between a business that can really succeed and a business that might struggle a bit more. So what do you look at when you are considering live streaming? The first thing, the question that you want to ask yourself is, what are the rights? What are online rights in music? what type of rights do you need when you are going to look at just music online? Let's just start with internet, not live streaming, just online music. The good thing is, from a legal point of view, you have a toolbox and you have a place where you can go to determine what are the kind of rights you need to look at. You have that at European level and in several European directives. And if you look at that, you will know that you have three types of rights that are really essential and important. The first one is the right to make copies, also called reproduction right. The second one, that is, again, from a copyright perspective, second right that you need to look at is this right called communication to the public. And there's a third one, which is not really a third right. It's a subset of the second one, which is the making available right, which again is in the same family as the communication to the public right. It's just simply a little bit narrower than communication to the public. So the reason why it's important to keep these three rights in mind is, first, because that's how copyright has been set up, with a division of specific rights, but also because each of these rights will be governed by slightly different set of rules, and they will also have slightly different legal consequences attached to them. So first thing, hi Ellen, we can see you. That's the first thing. Then the second question to ask will be, what exactly is live streaming from a legal point of view? So live streaming is also often called webcasting. And in a nutshell, you use live streaming or webcasting when the content is viewed or listened to in linear mode. That means that you cannot choose at what moment you want to listen or you want to watch the content. And that's, again, important because licensing content that is available in a linear form has historically been very different from how you license content that you can watch on demand. So now when you look at live streaming, you know it's webcasting, you know it's linear, all good. But what does it mean in terms of those three rights we have identified earlier? What exactly are the rights engaged when I'm going to start to live stream? And the short answer to that is it's complicated, but let me try to break it down in smaller pockets and see if we can try to make sense of it. First, when you're going to live stream, you need, the first thing you need is you need the source of that music that you want to live stream. So you want to be, you want to understand how do you gain access to that music in the first place, and whether there is any rights that will be attached to that. The response will be different whether you will live stream a live performance. So if I was minded to start singing right now, I would probably be live streaming a performance. That would be very different from me playing some music that I have on a sound recording. And if you are going to look at the sound recording side of things, which is the most complicated one, that's where you would need to ask yourself whether you have access to sound recording and a legitimate access to them before you can even start thinking about live streaming them. So it's essential to know whether you have that access. If you do not have access to that music, you will obviously need to either receive a copy of that music, you will need to buy that music somewhere, and that would trigger the right of reproduction. But let's set that aside and just consider now the real live stream. So the moment when music is being listened to in that linear mode. So at the moment when that has been chosen by the person streaming the music, not at the moment that has been chosen by the person who is listening. From a legal point of view, that will qualify the act happening, will qualify definitely as an act of communication to the public. I think there's very little controversy about the fact that this happens. There's also little controversy about the fact that there is no making available right. So again, we go back to the family, three rights: reproduction, communication, making available. Making available is a right that is being clearly identified as being triggered when a user can access music on demand. So when they choose, where they choose. So if you don't have that element of on demand for the user, you know that the making available right is unlikely to be engaged. so communication to the public, no controversy. Is there more happening when music is being streamed? If you look at the wider picture in the music industry, you can see that there is a little bit of a divergence of opinion here about what exactly happens and the rights that are engaged when live streaming happens. Is it really only communication to the public, or can it be argued that there's a little bit of a copy which is being like dragged along or tagging along the right of communication to the public, without getting into the nitty gritty of how the music publishing industry looks at that, because there is a divergence of opinion depending on which country you are in. Some will consider that the live streaming will be a little bit of communication to the public and a little bit of reproduction as well.
Right. Well, look, Sophie, I'm going to just stop you there for the moment, because I know it is an absolute rabbit's warren of complexities, and you've done a great job of sort of giving an overview, I think, of some of the things that we look at when you're licensing, the functionalities you mentioned of the service. Helen, I'd be interested from your point of view. Do you think that artists that you come into contact with and labels have an understanding of how complex live streaming is when they go to license it? I think we can't hear you. I think you might be on mute. Oh, well, while Helen's figuring that out, Nico, maybe you could answer that question. Having sort of launched a live streaming element of Mixcloud, what was your sort of awareness of the complexities of live streaming before you entered in?
Well, I guess for us, it's been actually kind of easier in a strange way. So just a bit of context and background. Mixcloud is a user-generated online audio platform where people upload DJ mixes or radio shows or things like that. And we have done direct deals with Ryan at Merlin and the 3 majors and a ton of publishers and PROs as well for basically what most people know Mixcloud as up to April of this year, which was the ability to listen to a radio show or DJ mix on demand again. And that was incredibly complicated to get those deals done. It took about 4 years of my life and gave me lots of gray hairs, and it was very, very difficult.
A few months of my life too.
Yeah, exactly. Live streaming is actually a lot easier because it's kind of been around since the 90s, and obviously this year it's kind of back in fashion, but it's nothing that new as a concept in a weird way. So I actually found it a lot easier than what we did previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen, can you hear us yet, or can we hear you? Still no, unfortunately.
Ryan?
Yes, we can
hear you, but I cannot hear anyone else. It's so weird.
Oh, well, I think can we all hear Helen?
I
Yes.
mean, I can speak. I just can't hear anyone else in the panel apart from Ryan. But
well,
it's interesting.
What else do you need?
First.
It's like a one-way mirror. Well, the question, Helen, is the live streaming is so complex, as we've heard from Sophie. Nico actually had something interesting. When it came to licensing it, he found it much easier than he did when he was having to do the on-demand side of their business. In terms of your experience, sort of having dealt with artists and labels, how well do you think the licensing side of live streaming is known?
Yeah, I guess the answer is it's not very well known. Otherwise, we wouldn't have had to do our guidance notes in the summer that Impala produced for members. But I think that what's interesting is that from a label perspective, the notion of live streaming has been around for actually quite a long time. So live streaming agreements have been negotiated alongside concerts, alongside all sorts of other projects. So it's not like a new concept. It's really more the platforms that are used now to do live streaming. The kind of ancillary questions that go around that. But it's interesting. that from the perspective of a platform, it might be easier to navigate licensing than for normal streaming. That's interesting to hear. But
Well,
I think that although the notions are well known within our labels, it was felt that there was a need for guidance, because there were so many issues around the question of remuneration, the question of consent, who's going to get the publishing rights sorted. And these are not new issues, because every time there is a live stream, then these issues are organized. But there was also a kind of a new dynamic around the whole live streaming question that made it certainly interesting for us to do guidance notes. And so we set up a working group over the summer that was chaired by G from AIM, and within a few weeks we had our notes out to members. So it's a really interesting area. I'm sorry I missed Sophie's explanation of the licensing regime, but maybe she can explain it to me later.
Can you hear me now or no? Just checking. No, apparently not.
No, so I was just checking whether you could hear it, and obviously you can't. Well, I'm happy to be the translator as such to Helen if you've got any questions for her. But they're pretty interesting. I think that there's been engagement from the well, I mean, in terms of the the working group, you said that was made up of a number of both labels as well as publishers.
It was labels and associations, and a couple of the labels involved obviously also have publishing businesses as well. Right.
So it's interesting. It feels like maybe now COVID has actually forced a lot of people to sort of come to grips with live streaming. I think in certainly maybe in previous years, people hadn't been sort of forced to confront it. But Sophie, do you think that now people are really starting to look at this and try to maybe establish some rules whereas there weren't before?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we are seeing, and to go back to Nico's point and Helen's point, is live streaming or webcasting, to use a maybe a more old-fashioned term, has been around for forever. And I think in terms of, I mean, forever, for a long time, for as long as I was in this industry at least. So yeah, the issues are not new, but the interesting thing is you can see that when you talk about broadcasting, which is basically, I mean, webcasting is just a way of talking about broadcasting happening online. The rules were very well known, and in every country, at least every country of the European Union where you would go, you would access very easily information about broadcasting, certain webcasting, but it's true that the expression live streaming is relatively new, even in the vocabulary of rights holders. And if you're looking at like purely online live streaming and players which are just online, that are not the continuity of a traditional broadcaster, then sometimes you would see that the information was a bit lacking. So you couldn't access that information quite easily. I think it's still the case today, depending on which country you are located. And if you're looking at, I think in the UK now, the information is really easy to find. But you might have other jurisdiction in the EU where you still have question marks, and it's not that easy to find information without going through a law firm or someone that's going to help you. So I think the fact that now you have so many businesses looking at live streaming is just putting this maybe this gap or this under a spotlight, and it's putting some pressure on the different licensing entities to maybe get better at communicating how they work and how it works. And
absolutely. I think just what you said in terms of there's so many different types of live streaming companies. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen, it feels like hundreds, in terms of the ones that were existing players and new ones that seem to be launching every week. I mean, I saw Maestro, Veep, Stage It, Release Party, Bulldog. Nico, I don't know, I mean, when you were doing sort of some of the research in terms of launching Mixcloud Select, did you explore what sort of models are out there in the market? And I don't know, maybe you could give sort of an overview of the different types of live streaming models that you're aware of anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we looked a little bit at what's out there, and kind of mostly seems to fall into, I guess, one of three categories. One is kind of people just live streaming platforms that are essentially relying on the DMCA. So Twitch is a classic example of that, and they kind of don't refuse to do licenses and sort of say it's not on us, DMCA sort of route. Then you've got platforms that are focusing really on kind of just artist live performances, so no sound recordings involved. So I think Maestro's example of that, Stage another example of that.
Sorry, when you say no sound recordings, do you mean that they're not using any sound recordings like a DJ would?
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be like a band or an artist performing in a live show, their own original material that they're performing live, so no sound recordings. And so most of those platforms only take care of the publishing side of things, which is usually like PROs. And then as far as I'm aware, I don't know if there's anybody else who is taking care of both the publishing and the sound recording side of things. And so that's, I guess, our sweet spot and kind of where we focused, so that if you're a DJ or if you're a radio presenter and you want to play somebody else's music, you can do that in a legal and licensed way.
Sure. Yeah, and Sophie, I mean, when you're looking at particularly, Nico was saying, if you've got like a live performer, it's like a singer-songwriter, for instance, that I guess makes it easier in some senses that you don't have to deal with pesky rights holders on the master side, but you still have to deal with the publishing, don't you, and other rights holders.
Yeah, you would definitely have to deal with the publishing. Another question that can be asked and that can come to the fore is when an artist has an exclusive agreement with a label, whether or not especially if the live streaming might be recorded and made available on demand at a later date or offline, sometimes you have to consider whether the provision of the exclusive deal you have with the label might require that you go and ask them whether this is okay, or have a conversation with your label. But the two key things for artists that are live, going live as a band, would be, what about publishing? And have I read my deal with my label to make sure that this is fully, okay? Those are the two key things, yeah.
Absolutely. And Helen, I don't know whether you're able to hear Sophie then, but she picked up on quite a few of the things that I think you brought up in the working group, brought up in the Impala guidance, in terms of, if you are looking to do a live stream, you really need to talk to your label first, just to ensure that you've cleared all those necessary rights, particularly if you've got an exclusive recording deal.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I can still only hear you, Ryan. It's very weird. It's really a totally new experience. Kind of almost feels a bit out of body, but anyway, so absolutely, that's the first thing that we would suggest is done, is check in with the label. But it's also, it's very much like a partnership. So labels can provide advice and work with the artist on how does this fit in with a particular project, what's our vision for what we're doing here, and also lend a kind of very pragmatic approach to the recordings. So should they be given an ISRC, should they be registered, what's going to happen to them in the future, how long are they going to stay up, is there a way of monetizing these longer term, etc. So it certainly, that's how our labels see it. You see, it's very much just part of a very big jigsaw where there are different elements that are worked out in collaboration with the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was an interesting point that you raised in terms of, and I'd be interested in your response on this as well. If you do have an exclusive record deal and you do a live stream with a platform, who owns that live stream?
Well, it's like, oh, sorry, Sophie, you're going to answer that?
No, go ahead.
I feel that you might have different answers to this question as well.
Well, obviously, if you have got an exclusive arrangement, with a label, then you both need to consent to a recording that's done by a third party. So the arrangements are set up, but the any transfer or signing over of rights won't be valid unless the label signs. But I think that's kind of like common practice. You know, it's very similar to when your artist does a show on TV or with a broadcaster. You know, you agree to the recording. There's some interesting examples in the UK where some of the sessions that are recorded with artists, there's an agreement in place with the BBC for those to be used in the future, and there's, you know, all sorts of and really interesting forms of exploitation. But typically, you'll always need to consent.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that answers your question, Ryan.
No,
Sophie can say what she likes. I can't hear her.
I'd be really curious to hear from people what percentage of artists do you think have that type of exclusive deal where they have to seek consent from their label?
I
Sophie?
cannot speak to the percentage. I'm sure Helen will probably have a view on that. But what we see when we do artist deals, it's fairly common to ask when you're a record company, especially when you're going to invest in an artist. It is fairly common that you will say during the exclusive period of the deal, and of course that period might be short or long depending on the specific agreement, but the existence of what is called typically in the industry the re-recording provision is going to be, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a deal without it but then the duration of it will be quite different depending on the type of deal, and that will be function of the duration of that exclusivity.
Does it depend a little bit on the scale of the artist as well? So if it's a sort of superstar, you know, signed up?
No, not really, because it's a way of protecting your investment. So if you are going to invest in working with an artist, it's also to say the same. So you are going to fund the recording of this song, so the composition. Another recording would compete with your recording. So especially if the other recording is released during the same time frame as the one that you are using to market this release so it's just this idea that not having two competing products on the market and having an argument over who owns the competing product, and it's just business common sense, to be honest. It's never really challenged because I think it's a type of provision that doesn't raise any concern in general because it makes sense from a business perspective. And to go back to the live streaming point, I think I agree with Helen on the point that when you have a re-recording provision in an agreement, if a recording is being made, it sounds logical that this would be captured by that provision. I think where we can see sometimes question arising is where the live streaming is fully ephemeral. So no recording is being made. It's just a live recording that has no existence beyond those 5 minutes or 6 minutes that the song will last. That's where you can potentially have an argument over whether or not it is a recording and does it qualify. But generally, if it doesn't have a lot of revenue attached to it, it's basically a non-problem.
It's interesting, isn't it, that there's still those arguments as to whether or not that there is a recording on something, you know, some of these matters which, on the face of it anyway, appear so simple, but not necessarily the case. I've noticed that we've had a question coming from Zara saying, which platforms do you think are the best for artists? So Nico, I feel like you might have a particular bias on this one. What would you say to that question?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I'm going to say Mixcloud because the company I set up and run. No, but honestly, I think I'm pretty proud of all the work that we've done to get as comprehensively licensed as possible. I don't think that there's other platforms out there that are as comprehensively licensed as us. And I think you also want to kind of look at what other tools the platform has, whether you know, you can set up a profile, whether your fans can follow you, whether it's easy to share things, you know, whether they have a monetization aspect. So there's a bunch of kind of considerations that are probably worth looking at. Oh, and sound quality as well. We stream at 320 kilobytes per second on the live stream. I think that's higher than Facebook, higher than Twitch, higher than anybody else. And so if you love good music and you have a good sound system, then it's worth kind of, you know, going for that.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, picking up what you said, it is important. It's obviously crucial that, you know, you look at whether the live streaming platform is licensed, because it's ensuring that everyone gets paid. I had a question for Helen. Helen, are you still there? You're back.
I'm still here.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and actually, I come back.
I was just going to ask you. So Nico was saying that, you know, when we're looking at different types of platforms, you know, it's really important to look at the different types of monetization options that are available on that platform. What, you know, from your experience, what are you seeing as being important to artists from a monetization perspective?
I think artists want to try as many different options as possible, and that there'll be so many services with different packages coming on that we probably can't even imagine today what kind of proposals there will be in the future. I mean, obviously, from our perspective, it's important that the work of our artist is valued, it is remunerated, and you know, so some labels may be more experimental than others in their approaches. Some really like the tip jar approach, others don't. I think it really varies from label to label, genre to genre, country to country, and it's going to evolve really fast in the next couple of years. I think we just don't know what's coming yet.
Absolutely. I mean, just picking up on what you said on the tip jar approach, and you said that, you know, some people are for and some people are against. I guess it depends, doesn't it, who you're tipping? Because if you're tipping a singer-songwriter, you know that they're going to get the money. But if you're tipping a DJ, it causes other issues, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's true. But you know, these are models that you have to go with and try, and the DJ is normally paid for doing the mix. So you know, those who provide those who are making the music are getting paid as well, typically. So there's a kind of tension there, which I think just gets hopefully worked out in the mix, if you excuse the pun.
And Nico, did you have something you're going to say on that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, we're kind of going to be looking at exploring tipping and donations as well, because I think it sort of depends. Like some people are comfortable with that. Some people actually are not very comfortable with it at all, and they don't like that idea. We are starting to explore ticketed live streams as well, just purely artist live shows right now. But we just launched the first 4 with Flying Lotus, who's actually on Warp, at least on Ninja Tune as well. Leon Vinehall, who's on Ninja Tune, Roisin Murphy, and La Fonda. So 4 great artists who are going to be doing live shows in the end of October and early November. And ticket price is £10 for each one. And it's kind of an experiment for us. We want to see, like, is the public willing to, you know, reach into their pockets, and in a time like this, when you can't go out to a real world gig, would you pay 10 quid to see a live show that the artist has put together and produced on the internet? Yeah, it's kind of nerve wracking. We're going to see what happens and how it plays out, but I think it could be an exciting, like, new area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, and just sort of picking up on that point, I saw that there was another platform called Moment House, which was recently launched. And the founder said that he was really trying to focus on, well, he's trying to distance himself from the term live stream, because he thought that was too limited. He really wanted to focus on moments that artists can have with their fans. And I thought it was really interesting that, you know, And it'd be interesting to get your opinion. You know, should we be seeing live streaming as something? It's not as a substitute for live, but as something complementary, something totally different. Helen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely what's happening. It's a totally new area, and one that will be, yeah, as you say, complementary, and you know, it's going to be part of very much the whole package. What's going to happen with it, with the release? What do we do, when, where? And that's what makes it exciting. It's almost like the crisis has been an accelerator there. I mean, clearly we are still in a crisis situation, and it's really important that we can work out how to get artists back on the road across Europe and elsewhere. But you know, certainly for the future, it's been a real accelerator, and that's very positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Sophie, what do you think? Do you think, you know, sort of in the future, this live streaming will sit side by side with live gigs? Do you see it sort of replacing it? Where do you see the future going?
We don't really see it replacing it, because I don't think you can replace a live experience, but definitely we see it as a new form of online entertainment that is developing, and a new form in its own right. I really like this idea of the moments as well, because the vision I had was like a Zoom platform, but only where you can chat with musicians and artists and people that have something to share, which I think is exciting. And then from what we can see, and also when you look at the different now, another area which I find fascinating and really interesting is how now you can have live experience within a video game. So you can go to a gig, and a live gig that is scheduled at a certain time within a video game.
Like
and that, you named it. So yeah, so that when you add all those layers and it's different type of online entertainment, and I think it really is an interesting area of growth. But I think it definitely, I don't see it replacing anything that is happening in the real world.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, Fortnite's a really good example, isn't it, in terms of, you know, a potential, you know, totally new world, like literally new world for artists to be able to explore. I mean, Nico, what are your thoughts? Do you think the sort of scale advantages of being able to reach new fans, or just users in a video game, for instance, like through Fortnite, do you think that sort of provides new opportunities for artists?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think the Travis Scott thing was really cool. I think that the challenge there is that at least right now, it seems like that sort of experience is very difficult to scale. So, you know, if you're a global superstar like a Travis Scott or something like that, you can partner with Fortnite and do that. But if you're, you know, kind of more of a indie artist, or kind of have a cult following, but it's a bit smaller, like, you're not going to really be able to unlock those type of opportunities. So I don't know. I think that, you know, post Corona, I think we'll start to see, you know, if real world gigs come back, I think we'll start to see interesting hybrid models where, you know, you can either go and see the show for like 15, 20 quid, or, you know, if you can't make it, or you live the other side of the country or something, maybe you buy a digital ticket for like, you know, 7 or 8 or 10 quid, something like that. And I think that is going to be, it'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out when the real world kind of gigs come back. But I think the artists and DJs and creators who are figuring out how to communicate with their audiences in a kind of really authentic way right now are the ones who are going to like make the most of this moment. Because if you're just doing the live stream and you're kind of not really interacting at all, I think you're kind of missing a bit of a trick, because you can kind of actually now communicate two ways. And I don't know, I think the ones who are doing that well will be the ones who kind of really flourish during this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it does feel like it's a new paradigm, doesn't it, in terms of what the options are for, you know, for artists in being able to sort of communicate with their fans. I mean, Helen, how how do you see, because Nico made an interesting point saying, you know, Fortnite is great for maybe some of the big superstars, but what are the options for maybe some of the smaller indie artists who are looking to sort of take advantage of similar sort of opportunities?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess Fortnite is the ultimate. My son got really excited. That was even pre-crisis, when I think the first gig was a Marshmallow gig, wasn't it? He was like really excited. He's like, Mom, we're all going to watch, and it's going to be the same. And it did look really cool. But I think the whole gaming sector is something that a lot of artists are already quite well advanced with. So, you know, it's a bit like the music sector. Maybe more independent artists will work with some games, not others. But I think there's, in every country, in every market, there will always be these opportunities. Maybe some we just don't know about yet. Clearly, for independent artists, there is going to be this kind of concentration effect, because, you know, we have like mega games that are mega games worldwide. So it's not just talking about, you know, access to opportunities nationally. You know, your chances of an independent artist probably getting on to Fortnite might be pretty slim, but we don't know. And I think certainly from what Impala's perspective is, within Europe, we believe there are so many more opportunities to drill down into the digital market nationally, you know, based on, you know, national artists and national language, national music. If we can persuade operators that there is a lot more to uncover there and to really develop, we believe like the market in Europe is going to grow so much at a national level rather than international. That's something that Impala's digital committee is looking at now. So how do we really maximize those opportunities? I think it's the same for in the live streaming world. So I don't know if I answered your question actually, but it kind of something else.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I thought what you said was absolutely right. And it actually, when you're talking about, particularly, you know, your child, looking at video games, and the fact that, you know, maybe some audience members are used to video games, and they're used to perhaps the gamification of, you know, virtual gift giving, which is a totally new sort of monetization strategy that, you know, which is totally outside the, you know, the physical gig setting. I'd be interested, Sophie, you know, when you're dealing with your clients who are looking to set up platforms, are you looking at these types of, you know, brand sponsorships and, you know, virtual gifts? Are they becoming more prevalent in the live stream setting now?
They are, but I have yet to see that become prevalent really when you talk to music. Like, I think I see them a lot in of course in other type of experiences being live streamed, but where in the music world, like 100% music world, I think it's going faster in other industries. The adoption of this virtual currencies and is going a little bit faster in other industries. And I think one of the reasons is not so much that music doesn't want to embrace that, is that the complexity of music licensing in particular, but all is sometimes like you need to solve that before you can get to anything else. And to just on Nico's point, when you were saying, Nico, you expect to see more like hybrid models in the future, where you could basically decide whether you want to go to this gig in person, or you might want just to see the stream. I was just thinking that we have been advising, I think, startups who've been pitching us that as a business model for over 10 years. And we've seen a lot of startups failing in bringing that solution to market. So I think the technology has been around for a long time. Being able to live stream from a venue is not new. There are some venues who are doing it really well and have been doing it for a long time. the Berlin, I think Berlin Symphony Orchestra is one of the venues where you can watch everything online, and it's been the case for many years. And what I would love to see is that I would love that this crisis we're in will bring to us the possibility to see those businesses actually work, and where we can actually imagine that your favorite venue in, favorite venue in Berlin, favorite venue in London, that you can go to that gig as easily as you would if you were around the corner. And I think it looks like now we have an appetite from everyone in the industry to get together and solve the issues that have been preventing that from happening before. So I'm hopeful that this will develop, and I think it will be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
At least from a user point of view.
Yeah, I second that. And I think what you say is also interesting, because it shows that it's a sort of a divergent in terms of the business models that are sort of coming out now. Some, as we've looked at, might be hosting live streams, but other entities are now looking to, I guess, become more like production vehicles for lives, in the live setting. But just picking up on that, on the point that you both raised on live streaming sort of sitting as a hybrid model with live gigs. Helen, I know that the Impala Working Group, in its guidance, was said that this recently has raised a couple of issues, for artists, and that festivals and live promoters are increasingly asking for broader live streaming rights. Could you maybe just say a little bit about what the working group found and your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Because there's a lot of fuzz on the line, but let's try. Yeah, that was something which what was caused a lot of debate at Impala, and I think there were some interesting leaked notes from Live Nation and that particularly caused a bit of a stir that were then subsequently withdrawn. And anyway, but I think, though, to be fair, the types of rights that are being looked for have always been asked for. It really depends on to what extent those who are signing are aware of the impact of the type of rights that are being requested. So it's just really important to check every time and make sure that there is an understanding and a common vision of what's going to happen, and that there is collaboration and a joint project to share the benefit. I think that's what makes it really interesting, and the fact that now perhaps there will be more willingness to consider joining Glastonbury from all over the world, and that's fantastic. And these are the opportunities that the I think now are accelerated, and really, as Sophie says, the door's wide open now to develop those kind of projects together. So I think it's something that our members are really excited about. And there is so much to be done, because festivals are local and national, and building on that is a totally new opportunity for our members. It's not just about accessing like the big top spot fortnight gig or the big top spot playlist, international playlist. Festivals will always continue to be national and increasingly local. Obviously, economies of scale will depend very much now on what happens with the crisis and whether there's a way through. But in principle, it's very exciting for the independent sector, because these are initiatives that are growing just like venues from the ground up.
Absolutely. Well, look, and I think, and probably, just on that point, that's where a lot of artists, homegrown fans are likely to be as well. So it's a great way of sort of communicating with the fans. I'm just mindful that we've got a few more minutes left, but and so if there's any other questions, please shoot them through. Maybe just sort of taking a step back and then, picking up on the point that you said, Helen, looking at some of the more practical steps, I guess, if you're an artist or a smaller label, and you're approached by a live streaming opportunity, what sort of things that should they look out for? Don't know, Sophie, do you want to have a crack at that?
If you're an artist, so from an artist point of view, if I mean, I think we've touched upon the two things that artists should be clear on before they start live streaming, which were like the question of, you know, am I clear about publishing? Am I clear about my record deal? To Helen's point, I think if you're an artist and you're being asked to give live streaming rights, there's also a question of being aware of the competing interests that this live streaming is going to trigger. If you have someone you work with on your live show, which is going to be the promoter, you also work with a record company, you might also work with a music publisher. I mean, it's always been a story in the music industry, right? That yeah. I remember being with Helen on many different panels in Brussels many years ago, and how we would always say that from the outside, music industry looks like one, but from the inside, we all know that there are different families, and those families don't always, you know, communicate that well. And of course, the live streaming is, I think it's, again, it demonstrates that you need to have everyone on board, and you need to have everyone will be interested somehow. That's the beauty and the difficulty of convergence, although I think that word is it's getting a bit older now. The same story will be true about live streaming, and an artist is always at the center of that story, because the artist will be the glue and what makes all these different other people work together. And so if the artist can be mindful of that and make sure that they let everyone know, and that they are trying to preempt any issue that might happen because of miscommunication or not telling one of your partner about something else you're intending on doing, that's definitely something that would be very valuable to the artist and to the success of the project in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, putting the artist at the center of everything is sounds like you know, obviously the best way forward. Nico, maybe to sort of just flip the same question to you, to maybe someone who's looking to start up a platform and is looking to enter into live streaming, what tips would you give them from a sort of a practical standpoint to be aware of?
Get a good lawyer. No, seriously, I mean, if you first encounter music copyright, it's absolutely mind-bogglingly complicated, and just, you know, way more complex than it should be. But yeah, work with a good lawyer. Make sure you understand what different rights are involved. You know, obviously, if you're watching this panel already, you're kind of one step ahead. So that's super good to know. And then, yeah, I mean, be mindful that I guess it's an old format of communication, but it's also kind of now a new thing, in the sense that, like, a lot more people, I think, are getting involved, and so there's a lot more opportunity to try out different things, see what works, see there's different ways of kind of interacting with fans, and I think it's going to be a pretty exciting kind of next year or so, and people are going to try out different models and different ways of kind of communicating and interacting that will lead to, hopefully, you know, better interactions between fans and artists. So I guess it's a good time to start something. The
old throw it and see what sticks approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really interesting to see what comes out of this. Well, we've got a few minutes left, so maybe it's sort of a final question for everyone. You know, given all the crap that COVID's caused and it continues to cause, I mean, if you had to sort of think about one positive silver lining for live streaming, you know, what do you think that could be? And Nick, I think you sort of touched on a couple of those points there, but what do you think one silver lining will be in the future? Sophie, any ideas?
Why don't you go to Nico while I think of it? I just want to make sure I think of a good
Yeah,
response.
Yeah.
I'll go first. If you're a touring artist or DJ, you don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. and get on a different flight and be in a different city every single day.
That's
You can do a show from your home or your local music venue, and you can broadcast it to the entire world, and your fans on the other side of the world can tune in and watch it. And so that's pretty cool.
It's a definite. I guess on the flip side of that is if you're doing you've got to come up with a different show every night. You can't just roll out the same set as a lot of artists may have done. What about you, Helen? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that it's an accelerator into, you know, another avenue in the digital world, which makes it really exciting, and that I think is such a positive step forward. I was also going to add that Impala has, you know, its guidance for members. So to answer your question about the practical things to look out for, we've actually got a check sheet, a checklist that people can use. They can get that from AMI or directly from me. So we have a one-page summary, we have a checklist, and then a more detailed note. So that's on the pragmatic side. That could be really interesting, really helpful. But then, you know, from a you know, forward-thinking approach, then this is a time of experiment and acceleration, which makes it really exciting.
Absolutely. And Sophie, I'm sorry, I picked on you first a couple of times about that. Any final thoughts?
No, as a silver lining, I was just thinking that to Nico's point, but on from the person who likes to go out and who likes to go to venues and also to go to clubs. I remember, I think it was at the early 2000, there was a company at the time, was it called Audio, where you could basically, you could watch live the different clubs around the planet leg, and you would be able to, I remember spending New Year's Eve and being able to tune in the different DJ sets and the atmosphere that were in those clubs, and that was fantastic. I have no idea what happened to that company. I don't think it's around anymore, but that as a person who likes going out, I would definitely love to see that happening again and be able to do that. So if there's anyone out there working on that, you can come and speak to me. I'll give you a good deal.
Well, there you go. There you go. If anyone out there is watching.
A project for Nico for New Year.
Yeah, we're gonna definitely be doing something for New Year's.
Mix 3.0.
Yeah, everybody's gonna be locked down, so we're gonna have to bring the party to the living rooms.
It will be in my living room for sure.
Well, thank you everyone for joining in, for all the thoughts. It was a great panel. Thank you to Neil Layton who's thanked us, and yeah, I think it was great having all your expertise sort of weigh in on those topics. So thanks very much, and I
thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks very
Ryan.
much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Cheers.
Bye.
I've got to figure out how to turn this off. There we go.
Yeah, pull the plug, Ryan. Pull the plug.
I think we're there.
I guess we're not live anymore, are we?
1 second. It's taking its